Welcome back. I'm still very new into learning about Warhammer 40K, but I've always been wondering about what it's like for the regular people. So people have been sending me this video as a recommendation. And as always, leave any recommendations down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's get into it because I'm very excited to find out the 10 worst jobs in Warhammer 40K. Well, there's also some other jobs, I'm assuming. Not everyone can work in war, right? When people forget their duty, they are no longer human. They become something less than beasts. They are no place in the bosom of humanity, nor in the heart of the Emperor. Let them die and be quickly forgotten. Damn. Well, that's harsh. I guess it is 40K.
When we look at the lives of those serving the Imperium, we must also understand that it is assumed that all of their service is at the behest and honour of serving the Emperor of Man and the Imperium itself. Now, while the official line from the Administratum would be that to give yourself in whatever means are required for the betterment of the Imperium is a noble cause, just and above all else a required task, it's worth remembering that these people are still humans serving in the Imperium, not superhuman Astartes or fanatical religious zealots, not cultish machine worshippers or drug-crazed hive gang members, just your average person trying to stay alive and do the best that they can. Now, while undoubtedly citizens of the Imperium know that they give to a greater cause and are indoctrinated from birth into the Imperial truth, at the same time
Oh god, wait, what is school like? Are all the math problems somehow related to how the Emperor is glorious? The Emperor has this many ammos for his gun, and there is this many orcs. How many is he able to kill? All of them. The answer is always all of them.
can't escape the harsh realities of some of the worst jobs imaginable for those poor saps who end up designated with such a plight in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Also, I think a short disclaimer is in order. By our standards, most jobs in the Imperium are often not really what you would quantify as jobs. You might simply be compelled by your seniors toward a role that then becomes your lot in life. There's really no true unified or standardized currency system within the Imperium itself either. To do so would be challenging, if not impossible, given the distant scale and general instability of the Imperium as a whole. While hive cities, for example, may use credits within them, or other planets operate on a more basic bartering system, some even using coinage, there's also the throne gelt, which is likely as close to being a universal payment as exists, and this is often used by, say, rogue traders and inquisitors who are travelling between systems. Overall, though, there's no unified economic system. It's all based on tithes and requirements for the Imperium's needs. It's all fairly inconsistent. While some jobs are paid and unpaid, it's often unlikely that you're going to have a literal choice in what your assigned lot in life is.
So it's kind of like how people just got jobs that their parents had or they were forced into when they were younger back in ye olden days on Earth, but like 1,000 times worse. And if they don't have, I guess, does it really matter if they don't have a unified like credit system? I'd imagine that most people don't travel between worlds. So if like one world uses credits, the other one uses coinage, it probably only matters to those that are traveling a lot, which probably they don't have to worry about money, I would assume. But I could be wrong.
People aren't going to be going out to school and then choosing a vocation, although obviously for some jobs, some roles, some level of moderate education is required so that you can best interact with the materials and data slates that you're having to handle. But you as an individual are an unimportant speck in the grand scheme of the Imperium, and you will do what is required of you, because that is your reality. Moreover, most of the Imperium trades in commodities. This can be raw materials, military hardware, and very often humans, so more than likely you are an asset and will be utilized however the Imperium sees it. The best way to visualize currency in the Imperium is that it's all system specific for the most part, and within a hive, for one, you are likely never going to leave, and so its credit system would be very specific to that location. There's no need for it to exist outside of that. Think of it like company money. You get paid by the person you're working for who...
Oh, okay. what is that called? I don't sometime in the 1900s, maybe, of the United States of America, maybe other places, they had it where pretty much you would do everything within your company. Your kids, your spouse would all live on the company property. You would buy stuff from company stores. Everything is kind of like just living at the company location and whatnot. I think there's even places like that within China right now where people marry within the company, like literally you're just working on like a sweatshop type thing and you marry someone maybe that's in a different department there, and then you get an apartment next door to the location, and then you bike to work, really, though it's all on the same property and whatnot. It sounds kind of like that, but still even worse.
Who then also happens to simultaneously produce all of your other requirements. So you then are being paid by and paying back into that same company. It's a good way to basically regulate what the citizenry are using and ensure that everybody gets their fair or perhaps basic requirement share of things. Now, you think you've got a worse 40k job in mind? Well, throw it down in the comments and maybe I'll include it in part 2 of this if I do a follow-up. And if you guys enjoy this and we open it up to even some more loose speculation for different parameters and different aspects of Warhammer 40,000, this could become an ongoing accompanying series. So now, in no actual order of horror, to begin with, servitors. Now, for reasons we won't get into here, within the Imperium, any advanced state of artificial intelligence is aggressively outlawed. So instead, the ever-ingenious humanity of the future has found a fantastic solution.
Okay. I'm gonna take a guess here, from the context clues that he's given. They just use people brains. Just put people inside of a suit or use their own little brain jelly and a jar, and boom, now that's kind of the thinking and doing stuff for you, kind of like lobotomizing the brain and then putting it inside of a jar. Although maybe lobotomizing would be a better outcome than whatever they're about to tell me.
To get around this problem, because we are, after all, always such great problem solvers. The solution? Well, as is always the case, there is a plentiful supply of human plebs, criminals, and general undesirables. So how about we part lobotomize them, hopefully they get the gift of being mind-wiped, and then fuse what's left of their still living but now eviscerated carcasses into a somewhat functional cyborg. It's not really AI, and it's not really human. Problem solved, everybody's happy. Except likely the unwilling participants of becoming a servitor. Servitors are a vital part of the Imperium, carrying out tasks too dangerous or too enduring for humans to want to take on the role. Although if no servitor were available and push comes to shove, you know that somebody's going to have to install that hyper-dangerous fuel system, and it's not going to be any officer types.
People are always looking for some way to get easy labor. That's why we're trying to make the AI and whatnot. We can't use people for some of this stuff, or we want to find a way to just take the human part out of it so we don't have to pay somebody. Well, we got to find something to do it. So how about we just make AI? And since Warhammer can't do it, just get the undesirables. No one's going to complain about that. And even if they do, are they really going to stand up to the Imperium? See how fucking jacked those guys are?
While servitors are questionably necessary, they are a sad and incredibly depressing...
Ooh, wait, is that from, what's it called? It's from some horror movie where a guy got abducted and then they put tubes down him with like jelly in his mouth and whatnot. Oh, it's some abduction movie, but I might be wrong. It may not be that. They like take out a syringe and they cut open the part that's covering his mouth and eyes right now. Gave me nightmares as a kid.
Portrait of the dark future. And it's very questionable, given the fairly immoral state of humanity in the 41st millennium, just how well lobotomized these individuals are if they're not mind-wiped. Servitors, while carrying out their instructed functions, if left to their own devices, have been seen to become confused and disorientated, sometimes found in a lost corner of a starship or missing in the maze of a hive city, babbling to themselves with a sea of incomprehensible speech, with perhaps some scant details of their former selves and former lives, perhaps trying to formulate some cognition or sense of who they were before. Worse still, we hear stories of people who undergo surgery appearing to be under anesthetic, but are in fact just paralyzed and fully conscious. So it broaches the possibility that some or even many servitors are actually fully aware of the lives they are living and with full awareness and memory of even their former lives, but who then simply lack the ability to speak or even control their own bodies, trapped in a silent, monotonous and potentially unending agony in the prisons they have been physically melded into. One of probably the most common and unpleasant tasks to partake in within the Imperium would be working in its vast factories.
Okay, before we go to the next one, I know he said in no particular order, so that might be like the worst in my opinion, but I'll see. I that's one of the worst things in horror for me, is like being trapped inside of your own body. It's that sounds maddening, but then even when you go mad, you can't do anything with the madness. It's just you're stuck. It's like being dead, but being forced to watch everything unfold before you without being able to interact with it, but still feel everything, I'd imagine. Oh God, I don't. No. Ugh. I wonder how they pick the undesirables. I guess they just pick the worst people in jail and whatnot, because they can't have anything like family connections and whatnot. God, can you imagine how just traumatizing it would be to see like your parent or your child or cousin or sister or brother as a lobotomized fucking slave? Ugh.
Now, planets with hive cities will usually be spattered with important resources, and their factories will then churn out any number of processed materials necessary for the functioning of their hive and or required by order of the Imperium off-world. The
Are those children? I guess it would make sense. The little hands can work on littler things. Are they like sweatshop workers? Ugh.
Administrators and governors will not care how these orders are fulfilled, only that they are completed on time as required. This subsequently means the conditions for workers are just about as awful as you could imagine. Toxic, acrid air, long 20-hour shifts, token
what the
pay,
fuck is
and
that?
squalid, cramped living conditions. Still, for most people at this level of society, it's probably the best they could hope for. Upward mobility is not a thing, and the only other options being to slip into vagrancy and an underhive of horrors. Even then, this is a class of citizen who no one will blink an eye if somebody goes missing for whatever horrible reason, and still grinding day after day in a factory of hot, dangerous, and likely condemning you to a slow, agonizing death as your body is ravaged by fulfilling your work quota, coupled with the slow poisoning it receives every day, is hardly an appealing alternative, but it's the best that many can hope for. An Imperial guardsman. Now, while a guardsman is obviously...
Oh, that was it? Ugh. I mean, manufacturing doesn't sound as bad as the other one with the lobotomization and whatnot. I guess, maybe with lobotomization you still have hope that you pretty much are just dead in all ways but physical. Ugh. I gotta ask, with the manufacturing thing, like, that just seems like a lot of people are in that. Why do people have sex? Why do people have kids? I feel like I would just be so depressed I wouldn't even have a libido. Like, to be like, oh man, I feel like also everyone would just be ravaged by disease and everything that it's like, I don't want to do anything physical with anybody here. It's just, I don't want to repopulate. I don't want to bring a kid into this. Do they have like, I don't know, baby factories or something like that? I'm kind of scared to ask.
Obviously an honourable and respected role for those in the Imperium, because frankly anybody forced to face down a 40-foot high lumbering alien killing machine who will in all likelihood either cleave you in two, strip the skin from your body leaving you running around screaming like a skinned animal, or just bludgeon you to a pulp, or maybe bombard you with projectiles full of acidic, boring maggots, deserves a reasonable level of respect, even if that service was in fact non-consensual. As with many military roles in the Imperium, guardsmen serve with a duality of horrific warfare experience coupled with unceasing immortal honour. Because of the extreme casualty rates, most guardsmen are equipped with simply a lasgun, because why give them more than that when they're not going to be around to use it? A lasgun being a weapon often referred to as a flashlight because of its extremely poor effectiveness against the severe threats faced by the Imperium. Other heavy weaponry for its soldiers are available, as well as some devastatingly powerful tanks, ordnance and air support, but for your average man on the ground, bad luck, you get the lasgun.
How do you rank up? Okay, that's the wrong term. How do you get promoted within like the Imperium? There's so many of y'all. Like, even if you do survive a battle and like, oh yeah, you did a good job. Like, there's so many of y'all. How do you get noticed? Be like, you know what? You get to rank up. You get to be, you get the prestige on the Call of Duty board. Does that happen, or do you really need like family ties and whatnot? If you're just some Joe Schmo, it doesn't matter how many battles you live through, how good of a job you do or outstanding work you do, you're still just a pleb. Or is there hope? Like, even slim.
While Imperial propaganda will tell the glory of serving in the Imperium, the reality is fairly disconnected from this stirring and glorifying rhetoric. The phrase battle of attrition comes quickly to mind for many guardsmen who will not receive much if any personal body armor, Unlike their superhuman Astartes saviors, nope, you're going into battle with the shirt on your back, and as an individual, no one is going to be stopping to help you when you lose a limb or worse. And the word expendable will be very much on.
Who is that guy in the back right there with the fucking square looking head? Oh, he looks like an ugly bastard, I'm sorry. What the oh my god.
Your commander's lips. Now, if it isn't bad enough that you're facing a nightmarish host of Xenos, your commissar will be standing right behind you, ready to kill you or your newfound friends on the slightest hint of your hesitation, or perhaps simply to just motivate those around you. Unless you have qualified for a specialist division or an elite force within the Guard, you're more than likely going to become Operation Human Shield. And if by some miracle you manage to survive the horrific conditions of battling alien horrors with little more than a gun that shoots light, having watched many around you die in the most unbearable of circumstances.
I'm sorry to interrupt him. Does that guy, like, right above me right there, does he have his mouth sewn shut? Kind of like the guy from, oh, what's it called? Some Halloween movie that I can't remember the name of. Why is his mouth sewn shut? Who are these? Are these special guardsmen?
And then still have your sanity intact, not to mention hopefully not having your body be completely broken. There's nothing to say that an orbiting Astartes or Inquisition may not simply decide that things are not going quite as well as they'd expected, and decide that in fact an orbital bombardment might best serve the fast resolution of the situation, and your service is appreciated, Guardsman. If you feel like you're having a bad day and want to voice your concerns to those around you, this is not advisable. Commissars will be standing by to silence you for potentially damaging unit morale, but like so many aspects of the Imperium, the most hollow element is the fact that in serving your family, your planet, and your Imperium, you will not be remembered, and will be 100% left behind if the situation warrants it. You will not be receiving a flashy service, or your family informed of your demise. You are but one of millions upon millions of soldiers, and while some planets are focused around specialist skills and military training, many more are unwitting or even unwillingly drafted. You will not receive special genetic engineering. You get your gun, your orders, and a direction to advance. Now get on with it, Guardsman, before your own officer shoots you for failure to follow command.
Jeez.
Next, in direct contrast, is...
Speaking of, okay, with how many there are, how many guardsmen go to, like, a commissary? How many guardsmen have, like, a leader in charge of that number of guardsmen? Like 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1? Because it's got to be pretty hard for them to, you know, keep track of all of them to make sure, like, none of them are speaking out and you can go, bop, shoot them. You can't have too many, so you got to have also a ton of those commissaries, a ton of those officers and stuff like that, right? I'm sure there's a book that goes over the pyramid of command.
The dull monotony of bureaucracy. You are the grease and oil in the machine as an administrative scribe. While many lives in the Imperium are pain-ridden and lives of frustrating physical agony, there is an argument to be made that endless perpetual administration is equally unbearable. The role of an administrator or an administrative scribe is to perpetually carry out tasks that must seem simply entirely pointless in the grand scheme of things. Your daily tasks lost amid a vast ocean of information. Your whole being lost in reams and reams of paper trails, and even the purpose and intent of your tasks are potentially lost to meaning, or possibly even no longer required, having been long forgotten about. Billions of clerks, scribes, and general admin staff work tirelessly to manage the Imperium at every tier. Compared to others, this may seem like a sweet job to land yourself, but imagine having to do the same thing every day, without end, without opportunity, and without meaning.
I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can relate to this. They just do the same thing in like an office job of like, why the hell am I even doing this? There's no point in doing this, and I do this just every day. Over and over and over again. Oh god, this kind of reflects real life. Oh no. A real life scenario type of like description is fitted into the first top 10 worst jobs.
In many respects, it's the closest
Is he smiling?
to hell for many. Pointless tasks with no thanks or appreciation, no sense of really contributing anything to the greater whole, cold, harsh working conditions, still subject to the same brutal rules and regulations that dictate all Imperial life. Indeed, the very nature of the complex bureaucracy that is strictly enforced allows little room for error. Regulations, forms, protocols, and process is your life. Worse perhaps is to live a life of blind ignorance of the goings-on beyond the walls and confines of your endless daily data processing. Many administrator positions are considered hereditary as well, so you'll be committed to a life of permanent placement facing logic engines and cogitator workstations. For an administratum scribe working in their specific sub-departments, all must be recorded, catalogued, completed in quadruplet, processed, and then as long as centuries later, finally archived. The whole process is grindingly slow and dull beyond the strongest possible interpretation of the word. And as a final insult, you must fulfill your role accurately and efficiently for the entirety of your servitude. Failure to do so risks intervention by the Inquisition. Administrative departments who have failed to maintain an acceptable level of efficiency, or worse, make a catalogue of errors, may be subject to mass summary executions by inquisitors for crimes against the Imperium. As a simple cog in a machine, you could also unknowingly participate in a scheme of upward conspiracy and corruption and be judged for this without even having been aware of doing so. A thankless, soul-destroying job where you'll likely never see anything beyond the incarcerated walls of your administrative vault sector.
Oh, I know what this reminds me of. It's kind of like the job that, in 1984, within that book. Not exactly, because they kind of just, like, covered up the truth and whatnot, but they just sat down, got articles, and were like, alright, wipe that away. That didn't happen. Yep, that happened. Okay. Send it along. And then just repeat, and repeat, and repeat. Probably that was a little bit better than what the Imperium's got going, but kind of reminds me of that. Now, how do they know that you fucked up in this job if it's so slow? And if you're like the person who's recording all this, is someone reading what they write? And all of the stuff they're writing, there's another guy who's reading it and fact-checking it? That's the, oh my god. It's just too much paperwork. That's too much. That sounds so agonizingly boring. But there are a lot of jobs out there in the real world that are agonizingly boring. Probably, again, not as agonizing as this, but it kind of says something about our society.
Now, the human batteries, otherwise known as Psychers, used to fuel the Emperor atop of his golden throne. Unsanctioned Psychers are continually hunted by the Imperium, and when discovered they will likely be transported off-world to return to Terra in what are referred to as the much-feared Black Ships. As an unsanctioned Psyker, you'll be assigned to one of two roles for the Imperium: training to a full operating Psyker or a psychic human battery to fuel the Emperor and the Astronomican's daily required injection of psychic power. Unsanctioned Psychers represent a great threat to populations as they run the risk of unwittingly becoming a portal for demonic incursion, and those imprisoned within its cavernous, permanently dark, freezing cold holds on the journey back to Terra, with thousands of other unfortunate members being probably the most harrowing part of the ordeal, as these untrained Psychers will expel their panicked and fraught emotions all around them. As such, only the most mentally strong Sisters of Silence will crew these vessels so as to be able to withstand the constantly soul-numbing despair of the incarcerated amateur Psychers.
Wait a minute. So, they're like, oh, one of them alone, like, we get super dangerous. They could unknowingly, like, make a portal to chaos. Let's put a bunch of them inside of a ship and then send them on over. Sure, they've, staffed the people that can, pretty much withstand all of that psychic energy. But you put all of them together, give them high levels of stress and panic. I'm going to have to assume that at some point, one of those ships have made a portal to the demonic realm of chaos. At some point, it's like, God dang it. Well, I can withstand it, but shit, they opened up a portal in their fucking stressful state. That sounds like a funny sitcom.
The majority of these poor souls, upon reaching Terra itself, their fate will be psychic disintegration, as they're consumed by the Emperor and the Astronomican, their very mind, soul and body being consumed in agonizing psychic fire, and their bodies and brains are burned to ashes. But it does keep the Imperium's lighthouse lit for another day at least.
There's 1,000
But
sacrifices,
perhaps
right?
At least highly appreciated task to carry out in your service for the Imperium is that of refueling a starship warp drive.
Oh.
This has scant documentation on who specifically carries out this role, but it is described as being similar to a funeral procession. Those chosen to carry out the task will begin by leaving an airlock to cross the service deck of a ship, wearing robes of grey metallic thread connected up with valves of long cabling, all wearing thick lead gloves as they carry their heavy metal caskets upon their shoulders. The service staff's eyes, nose and mouth will be similarly fitted with these connective valves, the unknown material they carry within these caskets evidently being extremely hazardous, for as these individuals cross to their objective, their flesh, skin will slowly cook and be burned away. This process being described by tech priests as the most perilous operation a vessel could undertake, barring actual combat. As the procession of staff would approach the warp drive central column, the casket carriers would become even further physically damaged and even start to disintegrate, but being driven perhaps by the chemicals and gases being infused into them as pain suppressors and some chemical concoctions to enable them to carry out such a task, they lumber forward. But the closer the carriers come to the drive itself, the more they begin to stagger and their metallic robes deteriorate. Their infused chemicals keeping them barely standing as their bodies begin to quite literally fall apart, chunks of flesh and matter falling from their person as they push on to deliver their fuel to the drive. The casket would be finally pushed into a socket of the drive column as some of the carrier's limbs would detach and strips of muscle and bone hang down from their gaping robes. Servitor-like machines would collect the remains of the carriers and scrape these into yet more caskets before tech priests offer prayers to the machine god. With the last...
What the fuck? What kind of you don't give me some of that, what they're pumping into them to make them go out there while their limbs are falling off. I want some of that. But, like, I get it. There are billions upon billions of people to replace them, but really, they can't just make a better suit? And what are they putting in there? Like, what's that corrosive? And, like, the only thing I can think of is radiation, but obviously it's obviously something not real, something that is much more potent than radiation. That is literally making them cook within however long they are out there, even with some protective gear. Or maybe it's not even protective gear, it might just be there to make sure they don't immediately die and get them pumped full of the drug so they keep going. They've literally put, like, cordyceps within them to make them just do a task against their will. How do they, maybe he'll explain it, but how do you get that job? I'm assuming convicts again, because you don't get a repeat use. One and done. You ain't coming back from it, right? Damn.
Last great effort, the final casket bearers would load their fuel into the drive before the doors would rapidly shut. The robed shells would now be retracted to the entry point, and the ship's captain might be heard to utter, "Emperor, preserve us," before finally turning away from the harrowing scene playing out on the engineering deck of their starship. Imagine life in something like the 13th century, essentially the Middle Ages, where anything like 90% of the population spend all of their time every day working the land. This is life on a feudal world. There are a few citizens with specific jobs working stone and metals, but your average person's life is doomed to endless hard labour. This physically destroying job is carried out from dawn to dusk, year-round, with the populace likely surviving on a meagre supply of its own productivity. A high mortality rate of disease and infection, industrial accidents with primitive machinery or domestic complications like no medicine to prevent women from dying in childbirth, this all in and of itself sounds hard enough of a life, but imagine, if you will, the job of a feudal gong farmer. Now what is this scintillating job? Well, it's collecting the mess of medieval latrines and cesspits, bringing it manually outside of a city or a town to be used as fertilizer for farming. You do get the privilege of searching through the waste if you choose to find any valuables, and by the way, you also have to work only during the night. And here's hoping you don't pass out from the fumes you're inhaling and potentially drown in the stuff you're having to rake out every night.
Wait, why would you pass out? It's just, I mean, it's just fecal matter, right? Is it special? Like, it's just people poo, right? What's in it? What? Is there something special about it? Why would it make them pass out? Huh? And it's a good thing it is at night. I don't want to see what I'm carrying. That doesn't sound as bad as everything else. Right now I'd pick this over all the other ones.
And for those on a feudal world, to top it off, an Imperial administrator will be watching from an orbital platform, and that's about all the defenses your planet has. So let's hope no blood-crazed orcs, hungry tyrannids, or immoral demons come wandering by.
Well, I mean, if it's tyrannids, you're probably fucked anyways, right? Because they kind of make psychic, or they make it impossible for, like, the warp to open up. So you can't send out a distress signal or anything like that. Nobody knows you're being attacked. Pretty much you're on your own no matter what, and I don't think any planet's going to have enough defenses to withstand a full force of a tyrannid invasion, right? If my lore is correct.
If you thought working a feudal planet or in a factory from material processing in a hive was bad, don't be so ungrateful.
It's a flyover
citizen.
state.
You have a privileged life compared to those poor souls working in agri-processing. While this is going to vary from hive planet to planet, some of the worst of this is processing what's referred to as corpse starch and ration biscuits, both unpleasant in their own way. As populations for the massive ecologies known as hive cities become quite simply ridiculous, housing anything between 10 and 100 billion citizens, the need for sustenance is obviously...
Wait. One hive city can hold, like, what did he say? 10? Go back.
anything between 10 and 100 billion.
100 billion? How? And that's one city. Is this city the entire planet? Or are there multiple of these cities on a planet? How? Huh? Are they shoulder to shoulder? How high does that city go up? Because like the only way you can do that is by being very vertical, or maybe a lot underground. Huh? Oh god, that's way too many people. We already have too many people. I'm sick of people. I don't need it. I don't need 100 billion.
In citizens, the need for sustenance is obviously difficult to provide for. And while you may be lucky enough to save up your credits and purchase a delicious chunk of rat meat, you're more than likely going to be enjoying some delicious ration bars or corpse starch. But how do workers produce such luxuries? Well, ration bars are best described as horribly greasy, generally unpopular, shockingly, and are biscuit bars to feed workers, serfs, and military forces. They're manufactured by harvesting bio-rich matter from ocean planets and worlds with seas, which then provides a protein-rich gruel. This, though, would be not enough to provide for the billions of citizens, so it must be instead fed to larvae of the Orochian bilefly. And when these larvae reach an optimal stage in their life cycle when they're plump enough, the larvae are going to be pulped by workers and compressed down into the hard-to-stomach biscuit ration bars. The agri-workers doing this process will work in huge air-sealed pens that produce these plump fat larvae. If you're working in one of these places, then things are not going to be going well for you, and you're probably quite low down in your hive city as the stench and endless droning vibrations and material mechanical sounds of the bileflies is not one that many would choose to live with.
Are the bileflies an Earth or Terra being, like, or a creature from Terra? Because otherwise, it sounds like we're using aliens. We're using filthy xenos as food? Excuse me? That sounds like heresy to me. What, we're using aliens? I thought we wanted to exterminate all the aliens, and we're using larvae of them? I was like, oh, it's okay if they're larvae and they feed people and whatnot. I wouldn't imagine there'd be hypocrisy within the Imperium. Disappointing. Ugh. I mean, though I was half expecting them to say that it was made of people, you know, like Soylent Green, so it took a turn I didn't expect.
Still though, it could be worse. You could be producing corpse starch,
which
is about as appealing as it sounds. This material is bland, filling, and relatively nutritious because it's basically reconstituted biomatter
Never
mixed
mind.
with animals, plants, discarded organics, and of course rumoured to include human
There it
corpses
is.
as well. While this is undoubtedly frowned upon by various administrative departments of the Imperium, it's one of those things that a planetary governor is going to either sweep under the rug, play down, or full-on cover up. It's never out and out a disclosed ingredient, but highly suspected that one way the population are able to be adequately fed is the mechanical reclamation of human biomatter, albeit then diluted by various other organic materials. It's like so many things in the Imperium, on the borderline of being acceptable. And when faced with limited options for feeding your population, the alternative being violent food riots, then it becomes a necessary evil.
That makes me think, has there ever been like a really bad riot somewhere? Like, I'm assuming that no one planet, no matter how much they produce, is so important that a riot would be bad. That it's like, oh no, they're rioting, you know, that sucks, and we'll put it down, but like, it's not going to harm anything really in the grand scheme of things, since it's only one planet. Or has there ever been an incident of like, oh shit, okay, we're going to put this riot down, but this is going to cause some problems, which might lead to more riots? Has there ever been like a threat to that? Because I get that like the Imperium military is super strong, but still, they need the people, and if the people riot, that's billions upon billions of people rioting. And even if you kill them, well, now you got nobody to make the shit for you, and now you're fucked. So has there ever been an incident where it's like, okay, fine, we'll negotiate? I'm assuming no, because that sounds way too hopeful for this universe. I don't know what they would change. And even if they did, they'd probably be like, oh yeah, we'll totally negotiate. It ends, and then they kill the leaders behind their backs, and it's like, oh, now we instill more fear, and then we just go back on our negotiation agreement. Something like that, I'd imagine.
Pity, though, the workers who have to work in the stinking, immoral environment where you must process endless stinking vats of biomatter, perhaps seeing some things that are going to be difficult to forget as you catch your eager 4 hours of rest before getting back into the production line. Now, I am yet to cover the assassins of the Imperium, but one aspect in being selected to work as an Imperial assassin is their pre-training. Now, as with most Imperial roles, it's quite unpleasant. But specifically, the role of the Eversor Temple, which disturbingly leans towards using the youngest recruits as they are less developed and therefore easier to bioadapt later in surgery. To start off with, most recruits will be orphans from a death world, of which there are quite unsurprisingly a plentiful supply in the Imperium. These recruits, after some base training, will be transported to Terra, but en route they will continue to be trained by a survival of the fittest assessment. These very young recruits will engage in what can best be described as an ongoing battle royale of wills, initiative, and resolve.
It's the Hunger Games before Hunger Games. I'm assuming it was before Hunger Games. Warhammer has been around probably longer than whenever the Hunger Games came out. Maybe not longer than Battle Royale in, was it Japan that made it? I can't remember. But it just sounds like that. It's like, all right, we're heading to Terra. By the time we get there, there better only be like 10 of you. Because if not, we're gonna draw straws.
Recruits are required to survive on minimal food, even minimal oxygen, for days on end, as well as continual forced fighting between themselves. This could be armed, unarmed, in near total darkness, or distracting aural and lighting conditions. Heat, cold, varying levels of gravity from the thin to the severe all will be factors in their assessment. When they eventually reach Terra, there could be anything below 1/10 of the original number of recruits who have survived this harrowing ordeal, or perhaps none at all if their assessors deem them unsatisfactory to requirements. The recruits, though, will then be organised by the temple they are best suited for. Eversor assassin recruits face, though, the further horror of being now forcibly bioengineered. These youngest recruits, who are essentially children, will be turned through this process into unstoppable drug-fueled killing machines. To achieve this, the Medicus adepts will use a range of genetic adaptation, endoskeletal restructuring, bionic implants, and infusions of chemicals to turn the previously human youth into a nightmarish weapon that can barely be controlled by its own leaders. Their cerebral cortex will also be enhanced and the brain fitted with lobo chips. These will amplify the assassin's state of mind to either raging hate, pure determination, or extreme fanatical drive for the love of the Imperium at any cost. This whole process is unpleasant and far from risk-free. Many subjects will die of massive multi-organ collapse as their bodies struggle to handle the severe restructuring. And this is not to mention the inevitable side effects from being turned into a bio-enhanced, drug-fueled, borderline if not psychotic killing machine.
Were these types of people created before, like, the dark age of, like, forgetting, you know, technology and stuff like that? Because if so, how did they learn how to do this? Because, like, they can't really make tech anymore. There's ships and stuff that they can't really replace, but they have them because they once knew how to build them, but they don't know how to anymore. So if they're lost, they're pretty much lost forever. But they can figure out how to bioengineer a human? Okay.
Past this point, the assassin will continually attempt to balance the complex cocktail of chemicals that's fueling and simultaneously poisoning their system. Finally, at the end of all this, the assassin will be placed in cryosuspension, their bodies so drug-fueled and their own mindset so completely unstable that it's easier than keeping them actively conscious. Before a mission, they're going to be placed into a drop pod and then fired down to achieve their task.
What do you think they dream of while they're unconscious? I like to think that they dream of murdering people. But, like, people that they really hate. Like, their officers. And they get some catharsis out of it. And then, like, when they stab them, like, rainbows come out. They like rainbows.
Becoming an Eversor assassin is likely one of the worst jobs in the Imperium, as your life is nothing but soul-destroying pain and servitude to be stripped of everything you were, and used as an indiscriminate weapon of the Imperium. Now, penal legions are the dregs
He said penal.
of Imperial society, so you can imagine these are some less than capable individuals. These are usually members of the Imperial Guard and PDF who have perhaps not been executed on the spot for their crimes and instead commuted to a life sentence in the loosest definition of the word. However, a penal legion can be easily made up of murderers, maniacs, thieves, in general criminal elements of society, or just those who were far too incompetent in their duties and have been sentenced to play some more mildly useful role for the Imperium. These legions, though, unfortunately, are basically the waste dump of human society and are forced to wear explosive slave collars that are more about turning the troops into human bombs than a disciplinary incentive. They march in a shambolic way towards their goal, or perhaps run if they're crazed, and then perhaps to just encourage those around them with whatever they're meant to be doing. Maybe a few of them will be blown up and detonated here and there. But is this the job we're talking about? Well, no. In fact, what we're actually sparing a thought toward are those tasked with maintaining control over these plebs. Penal Legion overseers essentially have the unfortunate task of herding a bunch of shambolic, potentially murderous and psychopathic cats. Some of the Penal Legion will relish their role and accept their death running headlong into the enemy, but others may fall into mental ruin, just falling to the floor crying, unable to move. Others may try to run away or simply just lash out and kill those standing around them. As frustratingly soul-destroying as such a task is, those commanding a Penal Legion are usually well versed in dealing out punishment, cruelty and incentives to their force, and will lay down brutal levels of discipline. Despite this professionalism though, it's still likely one of the most frustrating roles to have to command in, with a force who are potentially just as happy killing each other and themselves as they are the enemy.
Ooh, what
so
the?
now to finish, I'm going to have to break your immersion. But the truest worst job that could exist in 40k is, well, whatever you can draw from your own imagination. Because this might seem like a cop-out, but it's actually the real bedrock of 40k. Because while it has embedded canon and non-canon lore, it's also a world whereby you as a participant are encouraged to use your own imagination. The civilian life of the Dark Future is very poorly documented, and really we only have scraps of information compared to the endless raging warfest that is ongoing between various factions. The civilian life of the Imperium is perhaps one of the most interesting aspects that exists in the 40k universe, and if Games Workshop will not expand upon it, maybe it's time we start doing so ourselves with some wild speculations and imaginings. The whole thing with 40k is that the Imperium itself is so fractured and spread across countless systems with vast distances in between, it's really hard to focus in on some of the details of different worlds. Now this has happened very, very slowly over time with little fragments of information, but some could be, for example, nightmarish gulags, while others could be verdant, lush garden worlds of pleasure. Others could be more Earth-like with all the complex goings-on of human life that this entails, or you could be living in a horrific hive city or toxic choking forge world. Or how about a planet that's being cut off from the Imperium due to a simple administrative error?
Wait, what? I guess that makes sense. There's so many things going on that they just forget a planet exists, and they're like, they forget about us? Where's our shipment? Nah, shit. We can't send out our stuff. What do we do? And then they just have to survive there on their own. They're pretty much like starting from ground zero. Okay, maybe not ground zero, but they're pretty much their own civilization. Oh my god, could you imagine a story like that where a planet's forgotten, then over just like thousands of years, the Imperium rediscovers them and they like worship a whole new thing, a whole different thing. They've got their own super soldiers and and whatnot. And it's like, it's heresy. And sure, they can take them out and whatnot, but it's like not easy because they don't treat it as a real threat and whatnot. Oh man, that'd be pretty interesting. That'd be pretty interesting. Maybe they've already done it.
Forced to go its own way with the vague hope of one day being rediscovered if it's not destroyed by some other alien process in the meanwhile. And this for me is one of the most enjoyable parts of Warhammer 40,000. You can use your own imagination to build a whole narrative given the existing lore and framework of the factions within it. Often the world of 40k draws on real world history, and it's something that I really love the idea of doing in creating whole descriptions of planets and locations that are non-canon and entirely fictional. Perhaps this is something I'll find time to do, perhaps it's something you guys would be interested in me doing. In the meanwhile, worst jobs canon or not, tell me down below what's the worst thing you can come up with. I'm probably going to regret asking that, but let's see. As always guys, thanks for watching and thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, share some with me as well. I'm curious what people have thought of First thing that comes to my mind is the professional butt wiper for the Space Marines. They're too big, they can't reach back there themselves, and there's no technology for it. They don't have bidets, so they have their own personal butt wiper. I don't know why my brain went to that, but definitely leave any ideas that you had, as well as any video recommendations down in the comments down below, 40K or otherwise. As well, there is a link to the link to my Discord as well as my Twitch down below. But until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye.